Hey everybody, Todd Costello here from RE/MAX Center Realty in State College, Pennsylvania. Time for our monthly value message. I just wanted to check in with everybody. Once again, hope everyone's holding their own through COVID. Fingers crossed the vaccine rollout will pick up speed and maybe 30, 60, 90, 120 days from now we could all start hugging each other again. In short, today we're going to talk mainly about 10 buyer basics. We're coming into season. A lot of family and friends and people that you care about are going to be buying homes. So I just want to cover some buyer fundamentals, which we'll do in a minute. As far as the email, after you watch the video, go back to the email and you look at the monthly numbers. A couple of things of interest. As an example, inventory is fairly limited right now. We started off after the first month of the year, January. Inventory levels are down about 35%, so there are about 35% fewer homes available for sale as of the beginning of February 2021 versus 2020. And the number of closed transactions, it's only 1 month, but the number of closed transactions in January of 2021 versus January of 2020 is also down about 35%. So we got to keep an eye on that. I think it's just COVID residuals. People just, last fall getting ready for this year, probably going a little bit slower, not wondering how things are going to play out with the vaccine. So you can take a look at that once the video is done. But right now, let's cover some buyer basics as we come into season. So let's head over to the whiteboard. All right, these are big picture items. So for family, friends, loved ones, folks that you know are going to be buying a home this year, forward this message to them. Tell them to take a look at the video just so they have the basics covered, and we'll jump right in. Number one, again, very basic. It's 105%, remember that. So if you're a buyer and you're searching for a home, you have the purchase price of the home, but there are always closing costs involved. And closing costs, there's no exact science, but a rule of thumb that I've always used is closing costs are about 5% of the purchase price. That's going to cover home inspection fees, property taxes, title insurance fees, transfer taxes. So when you're looking at properties, if you're looking at a $200,000 home, really the total amount of cash that's going to be needed is going to be $210,000. If you're looking at a $400,000 home, you're going to need 5% for closing costs, so it's like $420,000. So just remember, when you're shopping, add 5% to what you're looking at so you have a better concept of the total nut that's going to need to be cracked to get you the keys for that new home. Number two, proof you're qualified. This is so basic, but so ignored. 25 years of doing this full-time every day, I have people call me, "Oh, Todd, I got your name from so-and-so. We're thinking about buying a home. There's one over at 123 Primrose Lane we'd like to see." That's all well and good. You've decided you want to buy a home. That's exciting. I'm behind you 110%. But before you look at any properties, you need to have proof that you are qualified, because no seller is going to accept an offer from you without having your proof submitted with the offer. So if you're getting a mortgage, what that means to me is not an online. There are some reputable online lenders, but it's almost like they're out in outer space. You want a local pre-approval letter from a local reputable lender stating that you are qualified to purchase a home up to X amount, and that's if you're getting a mortgage. Or if you're paying cash, you're going to need to provide what's called proof of funds. Bank statements, online statements showing that you have the full purchase price plus the closing costs available to liquidate and to purchase. So proof that you are qualified is really at or near the top of the list. You need to do that first. The other thing for buyers is going to help you decide what price point to look at. So that's very important. You need to have proof that you're qualified to buy the home. Sellers will not entertain your offer without that. Number three, cash to close. In this pre-qualifying process, as buyers, you can go out and look at homes all day long, but if you walk into one and you fall in love with it, that's when the stress can begin. So if you do this on the front end, how much cash are you going to need to close? There are three amounts of money that need to come together in order for you to get the keys to your new home. There is the mortgage amount, which the bank will provide. There is the down payment on the purchase price, which you're required to provide. And then there are the closing costs, which you're required to pay. So the bank will give you the mortgage, but you're going to need the down payment and the closing costs. What do those two together add up to? How much cash are you going to need to bring to the closing table to get the keys to the home? You need to know that. Before you start looking at homes, you need to know what that number is. Total monthly payment. This is also known as your PITI, P-I-T-I payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. You now know that you're qualified. You've been to the bank. You know how much cash you're going to need. All right, you move in. A month later, your first mortgage payment is due. What's the total monthly payment going to be? So as an informed consumer, as a buyer who, I tell my buyer clients all the time, when we start looking at homes, it's fun and exciting. The only thing I want you to be thinking about is this the one? Do we love it? You know it's in your price point. You know how much cash you're going to need. You have a ballpark of what your monthly payment's going to be. So you can really focus on the shopping part, on finding the right home for you and your family to live happily ever after in. So very important to know what your monthly payment's going to be. Number 5, annual maintenance budget. Something that I think realtors don't talk about enough because maybe it's not our job, but I like to point out to buyers, and even for folks that have been around a while, you're buying your second or third home, you know this, but especially for first-time home buyers, home ownership is not free. You don't put your cash down for your down payment and know your monthly payment and say, I'm done, this is going to be easy. Homes need maintenance. Someday you're going to need a roof. Someday you might need a furnace. Someday you might need a new dishwasher. Someday you might need a new hot water tank. You might need new carpeting. So you need to understand that part of home ownership is having a monthly budget for maintenance. And there's no set in stone number, but I often tell clients, I would say 1 to 2% of the current value of your home as far as potential maintenance budget. So if you have a $400,000 home and you need a new furnace, that's going to cost you $8,000. Well, that's 2% of $400,000, and that's just one item. If you're going to live there for 10 years, there'll be other maintenance things. So just understand when you're making a decision to buy a home and you know how much cash you're going to need, you know what your monthly payment is, don't leave yourself without some money in reserves for things that may come up that need maintenance. Very important. Number 6, buying before selling. Many folks call me, this is actually the largest part of my business, are folks that currently own a home and they want to either upsize or downsize. In this scenario, when people call me and they say, oh Todd, this house caught our eye, I say, well that's nice. Are you qualified to buy it before you sell your current home? That's a much more high-level conversation that requires really a 1 to 2 hour meeting on, hey, we're going to buy a $400,000 product and we're going to sell a $500,000 product or vice versa. You could be talking about $1 million or more in transaction totals. We need to have a real plan for that. So if you're looking to buy but you currently own, we need to discuss that first. Are you qualified to buy? Can you have your cash to close and cover the monthly payment on your new home while you still own your current home? We need to determine that before we start looking at properties, so this way you're in the strongest negotiating position. Lining up the dates. You are renting and going into your first home. You are selling your current home and buying a new home. Where do the dates come in? This is very serious. If you buy a home and then you got to carry your current home for 3 or 4 months, what are the costs going to be? So you need to understand, we need to have a discussion about lining up the dates and have a plan. And how long could you carry 2 homes if you had to? So we need to understand all these things before we get too excited about any one particular property that you're interested in. Home inspections. Just briefly on home inspections, I like to set an expectation. If you're going to buy a used car, you may go to a dealership and it's a used car, clearly. It may need brakes and tires on it, but hey, it's a good buy. The market value is good compared to the other ones, and you know you're going to have to put brakes and tires into it. Same thing with a home. No home is going to be perfect. Even if it's brand new construction, oftentimes the home inspector will find some things or make some suggestions. So just understand going into a home purchase that when you make your offer contingent upon a home inspection, what are your expectations when you get the results? Oh my gosh, it needs a new washer in the kitchen faucet. I don't want to buy it anymore. A new washer will cost you 50 cents. So what are your expectations on the home inspections? And what are you willing to accept? And what are you willing to not accept? You just have to have a thought about that. Number 9, contracts matter. In a contract that you're going to submit to a seller, it's a 10, 11, 12-page contract. There are deadlines and there are requirements that buyers have to take. You need to understand and be very familiar with what you're agreeing to. As an example, and I'll just give you a couple, when a seller accepts your offer, you have to apply. You must go to your lender and make a formal mortgage application within 7 days. So that goes back to proof you're qualified. You want to have your lender lined up. You want to be able to have the seller accept your offer, and then the deadline starts ticking. The meter is running. You need to be able to go to your lender within 7 days and apply for a mortgage. The home inspections we just talked about, there are deadlines for those. We need to get those done and get those reports to the seller with any concerns we have within specific amounts of time. So these contracts are very important, and you need to understand what you're signing before you sign it. And finally, I just like to remind folks when they're buying a home, the first 12%. What I mean by that is people buy a home and they live there for 3 to 5 years, and let's say they bought a home for $300,000 and they lived there for 5 years, and then it's worth $350,000. And that's great, you're up $50,000. But don't forget that you have this 5%. So you had closing costs of 5%. So you didn't pay $300,000 for the house, you paid $300 and whatever 5% of that is. You paid $315 for that home. So, and then when you go to sell, closing costs are negotiable. Realtor fees are negotiable. So I am just talking rules of thumb here. But you're going to have closing costs when you go to sell. And those closing costs could be 5%, 6%, 7%. So if you have closing costs when you buy of about 5%, and for argument's sake, let's say you have closing costs when you sell of 7%, well, that first 12% in property value appreciation is really just covering the costs involved in securing it on the purchase end and selling it on the selling end. So just understand when it comes to building a nest egg or building equity in your home, that the closing costs, you're always aware of them because you have to pay them, but you have to understand and use them in the scope of building your nest egg. So I just wanted to cover these basics today. It's a little bit detailed, but the folks that are going to benefit most for this are the folks that you know and you care about. Maybe it's yourself this year, that are going to be entering the buying end of the transaction and going to be covering all these things with their lenders and various service providers. So share it with somebody that you know, that you care about. They can give me a call on my cell, 814-880-4427. They can visit me on the web at toddcostello.com and learn a little bit more there. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay strong, and I'll see you next month.